So like I said, when you're choosing your lopper shear, a lot of folks will go on price. That's not always the best way to choose one at the hardware store. Go to one that will meet the needs of what you're trying to accomplish at home. Like I said, this one will do up to a 3-inch limb or branch. And anytime you're going to be cutting stuff, you're going to want some kind of eye protection and some kind of a hard hat and some good leather gloves on it. When you choose what you're wanting to cut, make sure that you're in a good standing point in which you're not going to fall, or it's not going to fall and hit you. So when we choose this, this is our simulated tree here for our event today. The guy's done a real good job of getting this set up. But we're going to choose the limbs that we want to cut, and then I always encourage you, until you get used, start with the smaller part of the limb and try it. You're going to let it seat all the way at the bottom of where it cuts before you squeeze the handles together. Another thing to keep in mind is if you start getting larger branches and they're harder to cut, because each tree is going to be a little different. If you have a hardwood, it's going to make it a little bit different to cut than, say, a softwood, like a poplar versus an oak. So if you start to cut and you notice that it starts to try to twist, you need to stop, because it's probably going to be too thick for what you're trying to cut. What happens is you can, just like a pair of scissors, if you try to cut something, it will actually bend and potentially break or bend the cutting tips of your shears. And for this type, this is probably about as, even though it says it'll do a 3-inch, this 1.5 inches or so is probably about the most I would feel comfortable with on that. So from there, talk a little bit about the saws. Today and age, they've got a lot of really good battery operated equipment available out there. When we talk about our saws, you'll have to see which selection is going to be right for you as far as the size bar. This one is a DeWalt model with a 12-inch cutting. This is great for limbing up and pruning up shrubs around the house. Once again, when you start getting into power equipment, the PPE is even more important, okay? So even though it doesn't have a gas engine on it, where you wouldn't have to have the hearing protection, you still got the risk of getting cut with the chain. It still uses the same kind of chain as a chainsaw on this. It's powered by a 20-volt lithium battery. On this particular saw, it still has the chain brake, safety brake on here. Anytime you go to use one of these, you're going to make sure that your chain is tight, and you check the tension on that using gloves. Obviously, you're going to come down here in the middle of the bottom, you're going to pull it down, and it shouldn't, the bottom of the teeth on the bottom of the chain shouldn't exceed the bar. From there, once you check your tension, you're going to make sure you got plenty of oil in here. You're going to be using a bar oil. It's what's recommended by most of your saws. Some of them has particular brand that you're going to have to use on the oil, but a lot of them, a generic bar oil will work. When you're operating these saws, it is a two-handed job, okay? Even though you can probably hold it with one hand, that is not encouraged. You need to have a hand firmly planted on the front guard and the back, and then in the event that the saw kicks, the safety mechanism will stop the chain. That's the purpose of that on that guard. So anytime you use it, you want the guard back, and you want to firmly grasp both handles. Anytime that you are carrying the saw, you want to carry it with the top handle. Keep your hands away from the triggers at all times. That way you can't accidentally engage it. And you also want to make sure the chain brake is engaged. Okay, so for this, we'll come over here. Saws are to be run at full throttle at all times when you're cutting. In other words, when I come up to it, I'm not going to put it against and then throttle up. You want to have the saw completely throttled up before you actually apply it to the limb. kick that back in place for your safety, and make sure your limb's away. Anytime you go to cutting, you're always going to look up and make sure that what you're cutting on is not going to fall and hit you in the side of the head. And that's where your helmet comes in, and make sure that you got your eye protection there on any of the sawdust. The last thing I'm going to talk about is our pole saw. They make a wide variety of different pole saws out there. Swap the batteries over. They're going to be basically the same thing as the chainsaw. You have the cutting head up here. You have the chain. Here's the safety cover on the chain. And it's got the chain tool on it. We're going to check. And it's tight. We've got oil in the tank. And we've applied our battery on it. Now this has got a safety in the throttle so that it can't be applied until you pull back and then depress it and then squeeze the handle. So once again, on a pole saw, they do really good on limbing up stuff. Make sure that you're not using it in a way that it's not supposed to be used. A lot of times I see folks, they come out with any kind of saw, and I see them, they try to do this like you're using a handsaw. Typically when you see that, that means that your chain is dull and they're trying everywhere in the world to continue cutting it. But we're going to go ahead and choose us a limb or two here and go do a good demonstration on how to safely cut this. This has got a guard here at the very bottom that you'll put up against the limb. Once again, you'll go full throttle before you actually apply it. Once you have a limb that's come loose like that, get it and discard it. And the last thing we're going to cover is actually our chipper. If you have a chipper, we're going to do a chipping demonstration on how to safely utilize a chipper. So today we have a Power King. It will do up to about a 4-inch limb, I believe. Once again, it's very, very important to know the size of a limb or branch that your chipping equipment will use. We have got this one firmly secured here, and we've got us a trailer that it's going to be depositing into. You want to make sure that you're familiar with all the safety guidelines. Like this one has an emergency safety switch up here at the very top of it, so that if something was to happen, you can hit it and it will kill the engine. As it says here, you don't ever stick your hands or your arms beyond this guard. This is your safety guard in here. Obviously, the cutting edge and the hammer is down here in the very bottom of the unit, but at no time would you ever want to put anything, your arms beyond this perimeter on it. If a limb gets stuck, or if you start having mechanical issue, then you need to shut it down before you attempt to try to get anything loose from the chute. Otherwise, it could kick back and hit you, or potentially catch your arm and try to pull you in. So we're going to go ahead and fire this up. Almost. One more time. Awesome. Notice I didn't power it off until it was full with chipping the previous limb, and that keeps it from getting bound up into the hammer and the cutting forge located in the bottom of the power tool. All of these things are really good to have around your home to mitigate the wildfire fuels that you can find. Like I said, the battery technology is really great. They make a lot of these that are powered with gasoline engines, and they do great. But for small limbing and pruning around the home, I definitely recommend the battery ones. So, anybody got any questions on what we've done? Nope. Okay, that will be it for this session.